want to talk about attribution because in reporting, you want to be able to attribute success within a given campaign or a multitude of campaigns, whatever it is that's occurring. You want to be able to say, hey, email drove 60 million, and we know exactly how we got there, and that number is correct, and we could pivot based on that number. What have you all seen with regards to clients and how they either have a strong attribution model or where you see opportunities to help them shore that up so that they can know that they can rely on the reports that are built for them?
I guess I could jump in. Kristen, you'll probably be able to answer this more nuanced than me. But I've seen, generally speaking, when I've been involved in helping clients determine an attribution model for their business that makes sense, it generally falls into one of three categories. There's either a first touch attribution, there's a last touch attribution, or a multi-touch attribution model. Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're pretty much advocates of multi-touch. We know that there's a lot of micro interactions that contribute into ultimately converting a prospect into a customer, and then that customer into long-term profitable revenue. So I've seen different theories on that. Kristen, you and I were just talking with a prospect the other day, and he was saying, I can't convince my leadership to move to a multi-touch model. They're just convinced that it's the last activity gets all full attribution, and as marketers, we're feeling shortchanged because we know that a paid media campaign that I ran ultimately brought them into our universe, but I'm getting no credit for it. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of different theories and schools of thought on that, but generally speaking, given our experience, I'll speak for my own experience, there's a lot that goes into, especially companies that have longer sales cycles. There's a lot that goes into nurturing and ultimately converting that customer. And we've seen that buying committees have grown in size. So it's not just a single contact that you have to track and attribute revenue towards or a conversion goal against. It's the account holistically, which now has more contacts and members that are part of a buying committee. So the attribution models have grown more complex over recent years, but there's a few different ways that you can skin a cat, as they say.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I completely agree. And I think those are great examples. We did have that discussion with that one prospect, and we had a great discussion with that prospect and kind of, where his leadership was and some of the discussions on why they want to use a last touch model instead of a multi-touch model. And so, just my thoughts on it, aligned to what Jeff just mentioned. You need to understand the business, because what you would want to have a discussion from an attribution modeling aspect and looking at your return on investment and what you've done in terms of being able to look at, how should you optimize different campaigns, different medias that you have in flight. So, if we're talking about e-commerce, there's going to be a discussion that we want to have compared to if we're talking about a manufacturing kind of conversion and looking at that funnel. So, when we talk about attribution, you have to think of it in a couple ways. So, one, how are you setting yourself up for success in understanding attribution of the media, the content that you have in market? And so what I mean by that is, from a technical landscape, what are you set up with? So, there's tools that can help with attribution, like Visible, but there's also methods that can help you with attribution. So you want to make sure that in areas when you're looking at inbound campaigns, links that you're getting inbound activity to, that you're tagging those appropriately, that you have a methodology that you're using that helps you understand, the different platforms, the different campaigns, the content, and the audiences all aligned to those inbound techniques. Now, of course, there's more than just inbound going on. So you also need a way to be able to track that in terms of, let's say you're a manufacturing organization and you're going to trade shows. And you need to have some way of capturing those conversations, understanding the content that's part of those conversations. So oftentimes, I know we're all kind of used to this potentially at this time, is you're at a trade show and you see everybody with iPads and they're getting your information in the iPad, and you're basically, that's promoting a system of understanding the source of where that activity, that lead as an example, is coming from, is this trade show, and how it's going into the CRM would be coded with that, because we would have an attribution system of understanding from an inbound method of basically, this is a trade show lead. I can tell this based on the content of the iPad that's potentially going into a form that's going into the CRM that would have coding alongside that. So not to get super granular here, but it's understanding the technology and some of the pieces here that you have to set up to be able to look at how you're attributing these different activities. And you really need to bucket those activities. So, we've worked with clients where we're looking at, different paid owned activities. You're looking at offline activities versus online activities, and how you look at being able to track those. And to the multi-touch environment, as we were speaking, it's not really a linear approach anymore, even with e-commerce, where somebody sees one ad, they convert. That might be a fraction of the population, but oftentimes, especially with larger sales cycles, there is going to be a variety of touch points online and offline that happen, that all need to have a system in place to see what are those touch points. So did they see a display ad, went to the site, read a white paper, we had sales call them, they came back to the site, all examples of touch points that you want to make sure that you are tracking, so you can see how you can optimize the funnel. And that's really the end goal. We can, and I see this, and I try to have this discussion a lot with my team, we get really passionate about all of the opportunities of how technically you can track this, but what's the goal at the end of the day? We need to get more sales faster, and basically increase our revenue, increase our customer count. And so how do we do that? We need to understand what's working in terms of the touch point. Do we have pieces of content out there that are not working as hard as maybe certain salespeople or certain ads in market? So knowing what works well helps us get to that end goal of getting that growth that we're trying to look for.
Well, that's excellent wealth of information, and look, as we're aware, you can get some of this energy if tap in with us.